We will continue with the chapter. In the previous video, we studied about how print came to India, and in the beginning, how we shifted ourselves from the print of manuscripts to the mechanized printing, where the first printing press started in Goa by the Portuguese. Now, from the early 19th century, as you know, there were intense debate about the religious issues. Now, this is the impact of print on religious issues. Different groups confronted the changes happening within colonial society in different ways, and they offered their own interpretations of the belief. Some criticized existing practices, campaigned for reforms, others countered the arguments of reformers. These debates were carried out in public and in print. The printed tracts and newspapers helped to spread the new ideas. Also, they shaped the nature of the debate. Now, because the print is available to all, wider public could now participate in these public discussions and express their views. This was a time of intense controversies between social and religious reformers and the Hindu orthodoxy over matters like widow immolation, monotheism, Brahmanical priesthood, and idolatry. In Bengal, as the debate developed, tracts and newspapers proliferated, circulating a variety of arguments. To reach a wider audience, the ideas were printed in the everyday spoken language, that is, the vernacular language. Ram Mohan Roy published Sambad Kaumudi from 1821, and the Hindu Orthodoxy commissioned Samachar Chandrika opposing Ram Mohan Roy's opinion. You might be remembering Ram Mohan Roy for the abolition of sati. From 1822, two Persian newspapers were published, Jami Jahannama and Shamsul Akbar. In the same year, a Gujarati newspaper, the Bombay Samachar, made its appearance. In North India, the ulama were deeply anxious about the collapse of Muslim dynasties. Ulama is the highly educated elite class of the Muslims. They feared that colonial rulers would encourage conversion and change the Muslim personal laws. To counter this, they used cheap lithographic presses, published Persian and Urdu translation of the Holy Scriptures, and printed religious newspapers and tracts. The Deoband Seminary, founded in 1867, published thousands upon thousands of fatwas. Fatwa is something like a law, telling Muslim readers how to conduct themselves in their everyday lives and explaining the meaning of Islamic doctrines. All through the 19th century, a number of Muslim sects and seminaries appeared, each with a different interpretation of faith, each keen on enlarging its following and countering the opponents. Urdu print helped them conduct these battles in public. This is about the impact of print on Muslims. Look at Hindus. Among Hindus too, print encouraged the reading of religious texts, especially the vernacular languages. The first printed edition of the Ramcharitmanas of Tulsidas, 16th century poet, came out in Kolkata in 1810. By the mid-19th century, cheap lithographic editions flooded the North Indian markets. From 1880s. The Naval Kishore Press at Lucknow and Sri Venkateshwara Press in Bombay published numerous religious texts. In their printed and portable form, these could be easily be read by anybody at any place and at any time. They could also be read out to a large group of men and women, illiterate, those who do not know how to read. Religious text therefore reached a variety of diverse of people, wide circle of people, encouraging discussions, debates, controversies among the different religions. Print so did not only stimulate the publication of conflicting opinions, but it also connected communities and peoples in different parts of India. Newspapers conveyed news from one place to another, creating pan-Indian identities. Now, during that time, which are the books that got published in India? Now, Printing created an appetite for new kinds of writing as more and more people could now read. They wanted to see their own lives, experiences, emotions, relationships reflected in a novel or something like a book to be read. The novel is the first one, a literary form which had developed in Europe, ideally catered to this need. It soon got the Indian form and style. For readers, it opened up a new world of experience and gave a different view of the human lives. Other literary forms included lyrics, short stories, essays, anthologies, political matters, essays about social and political matters. In different ways, they reinforced the new emphasis on human lives and intimate feelings. So, whatever they wrote, the primary concern would be the human lives and their intimate feelings. By the end of the 19th century, a new visual culture was taking shape. While within the setting of an increasing number of printing press, visual images started to be reproduced. Painters like Raja Ravi Verma produced images for the mass circulation. You have studied about the painting style of Raja Ravi Verma in the class 8th. Poor wood engravers who would make wood blocks set up near the letter presses were employed by the print shops. Cheap prints and calendars easily available in the bazaar could now be bought by a poor people, bought by the poor, so they can decorate their walls of their homes. You remember Raja Ravi Verma was painting, and his paintings were very popular, including the paintings of the goddesses, of the Hindu god and goddesses. These prints began shaping popular ideas about modernity, tradition, religion, and politics, and society and culture. By the 1870s, caricature and cartoons were also being published in journals and newspapers. They were obviously commenting on social and political issues. Some caricatures ridiculed the educated Indians' fascination with Western taste and clothes, while others expressed the fear of social change. They were mocking Western style. There were imperial caricatures lampooning nationalist as well as nationalist cartoons criticizing the imperial rule. Now, this is the Ramcharitmanas, Tulsi Das. Obviously, you can see it here. These are the paintings of Raja Ravi Verma. Very famous paintings. You might have seen these paintings. This is one of his famous painting, and this is Raja Ravi Verma. Now let's go to the most important one, that is women and print in India. We have studied about the Western women and the impact of print on Western women. Let's study about the Indian women as well. Lives and feelings of women began to be written in particularly different ways. Women's reading, therefore, increased enormously in middle class homes. Liberal husbands and fathers began educating their women folk at home. They sent them to schools where women's schools were set up in the cities and towns. Many journals began carrying writings by women and explained why women should be educated. They also carried a syllabus and attached suitable reading material which could be used for home based schooling. Now, remember, not all the families were liberal. Conservative Hindus believed that a literate girl would be widowed, and Muslims feared that educated women would be corrupted. Now, look at their feelings. They were not open to reading because conservative Hindus thought a literate girl would be widowed, and the Muslims thought they would be corrupted. Sometimes rebel women defied such prohibition. We know the story of a girl in a conservative Muslim family of North India who secretly learned to read and write in Urdu. Her family wanted to read only in Arabic Quran, which she did not understand. So she insisted on learning to read a language that was her own. If you know her name, you can comment in the comment box. In East Bengal, in the early 19th century, uh, Rashundari Devi, a young married girl in a very orthodox household, learned to read in the secrecy of her kitchen. Later, she wrote her autobiography Amar Jeevan. She did not go to school. She was in her kitchen. She read with the help of her son and her husband. Husband was a liberal one, and she read from Chaitanya Bhagavata, and later went on to write her own autobiography, which was published in 1876. It was the first full-length autobiography published in the Bengali language. Since social reforms and novels had already created a great interest in women's lives and emotions, there was also an interest in what women would have to say about their own lives. From 1860, a few Bengali women like Kailash Bashini Devi wrote books highlighting the experiences of women, about how women were imprisoned at home, kept in ignorance, forced to do the domestic labor, and they were treated unjust. In the 1880s, present-day Maharashtra, Tarabai Shinde and Pandit Ramabai wrote with the passionate anger about the miserable lives of upper caste Hindu women, especially the widows. Women in Tamil novel expressed what reading meant to women who were so greatly confined by small regulations. For various reasons, my world is small. More than half my life's happiness has come from books, writes a Tamil writer. While Urdu, Tamil, Bengali, Marathi print culture had developed, early Hindi printing began seriously only from the 1870s. Soon, a large segment of it was devoted to the education of women. In the early 20th century, journals written for and sometimes edited by women became extremely popular. They discussed issues like women's education, widowhood, widow remarriage, and national movement. Remember, during the time of Dandi March, a lot of women followed Gandhiji. Some of them offered household and fashion lessons to women and brought entertainment through short stories and serialized novels. In Punjab too, similar folk literature was widely printed from early 20th century. Ram Chadda published the fast-selling Istri Dharam Vichar to teach women how to be obedient wives. The Khalsa Tract Society published cheap booklets with a similar message. Many of these were in a form of dialogues about the qualities of good women. In Bengal, the entire area in central Calcutta, the Battala region, was devoted to the printing of popular books. You could buy cheap editions of religious tracts, scriptures, as well as literature that was considered as obscene and scandalous. By the late 19th century, a lot of these books were being profusely illustrated with woodcuts and colored lithographs. Peddlers took the Battala publications to homes, enabling women to read them in their leisure time. So, from reading, women began writing. Now, this is Rasundari Devi and her book Amar Jiban. Pandita Ramabai and Tarabai Shinde. This is the lady that we talked about, Sultana's dream, Begum Rokia Sakawat Hussain. Now, very cheap small books were brought to markets in the 19th century Madras towns and sold at crossroads, allowing poor people traveling to markets to buy them. Public libraries were set up so that it can provide access to the poor people. The libraries were located mostly in cities and towns, and at times in prosperous villages. For rich local patrons, setting up a library was acquiring prestige. From the late 19th century, issues of caste discrimination began to be written about in many printed tracts and essays. Jyotiba Phule, the Maratha pioneer of low caste protest movements, wrote about the injustices of caste system in his book Gulamgiri. In the 20th century, B.R. Ambedkar in Maharashtra and E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, better known as Periyar, wrote powerfully on the caste, and their writings were read all over. Local protest movements and sects, they also wrote a lot of popular journals and tracts criticizing ancient scriptures and envisioning new and just future. Workers in factories too overworked and lacked education to write about their experiences, but Kashi Baba, a Kanpur mill worker, wrote and published Chote or Bade Ka Sawal. Obviously, the book shows the link between caste and class exploitation. The poems of another Kanpur mill worker who wrote under the name of Sudarshan Chakar, between 1935 to 1955 were brought together and published in a collection called Sachi Kavitaye. Remember these? By the 1930s, Bangalore cotton mill workers set up libraries to educate themselves, following the example of Bombay workers. They were all sponsored by social reformers who tried to restrict excessive drinking among them, to bring literacy, to propagate the message of nationalism. Before 1798, the colonial state under East India Company was not too concerned with censorship. Strangely, its early measures to control printed matter were directed against Englishmen in India. Of company hated the actions of particular, sorry for the scribbling, particular company officers. The company was worried that such criticisms might be used by its critics in England to attack. Well, let's see whether I can go back to it. Okay, fine. By the 1820, the Calcutta Supreme Court passed certain regulations to control press freedom, and the company began encouraging publications of newspapers that would celebrate British rule but not criticize. In 1835, faced with urgent petitions by editors of English and vernacular newspapers, Governor General William Bentinck agreed to revise the press law. Thomas Macaulay, a liberal colonial official, formulated new rules that restored the earlier freedoms. Now, after the revolt of 1857, the attitude to freedom of the press changed. Enraged Englishmen demanded a clamp down on the native press as vernacular newspapers became assertively nationalist. They started printing nationalist messages. So they had to bring or clamp these newspapers. So in 1878, obviously this is very important, Vernacular Press Act was passed, modeled on the Irish press law. It provided with the government extensive rights to censor reports and editorials in the vernacular press. From now on, the government kept regular track of the vernacular newspapers. If a report was judged as seditious, then the newspaper would be warned, and if the newspaper would ignore the warning, the press was liable to be seized and the printing machinery confiscated. That's what provided the Vernacular Press Act. Now, this is Gulamgiri, written by Jyotiba Phule, and obviously this is Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Now, despite repressive measures, nationalist newspapers grew in numbers. They reported on colonial misrule and encouraged nationalist activities. Attempts to throttle nationalist criticism provoked militant protest. Still, there was no backing down. When Punjab revolutionaries were deported in 1907, Bal Gangadhar Tilak wrote with great sympathy about them in his paper called Kesari. This led to his imprisonment in 1908, provoking in turn widespread protests all over India. Now that concludes the print culture and the modern world chapter. There were 3 videos. The chapter was split into 3 parts. If you have any confusions or any questions regarding any of the part, you can please put your questions in the comment box and we will discuss about that one. For the time being, it's thank you and goodbye.